Hey, welcome back to Compounding Quietly. Most investors comparing QQQ and QQQM are asking the wrong question. Both funds look the same, and that is exactly what makes this confusing. The real question is, which structure fits the investor you actually are? Let's get into it. If you have spent any time researching Nasdaq 100 ETFs, this comparison shows up eventually. QQQ or QQQM, which one should I be in? And the reason it keeps coming up is not because the answer is hard to find. It is because the question feels important. You are putting real money into a long-term position. You want to make sure you are doing it efficiently. That instinct is exactly right. But the way most investors approach this comparison tends to lead them toward the wrong signal. They look at the charts first. The charts look almost identical because they track the same index, the Nasdaq 100, the same 100 companies, the same weights, the same rebalancing methodology. If you put both ETFs on a 10-year return chart, you would struggle to find a meaningful visual difference. So if the returns are effectively the same, why does this comparison matter? Because the difference between QQQ and QQQM is not about returns. It is about structure. And within that structure, there is a quiet, ongoing cost, one that compounds over time, depending on how you invest. Here is the behavior I see most often. An investor discovers Nasdaq 100 exposure. They do some research. QQQ shows up first. It is the most recognized ticker in this space. It has been around since 1999. It has decades of track record. It has enormous daily trading volume. And so they buy it, not because they carefully evaluated it against an alternative, but because it was the first thing they found and it felt authoritative. That is not a mistake exactly, but it may not be the optimal long-term choice. And the reason has to do with a deliberate decision Invesco made when they launched QQQM in October 2020. They were not building a competitor to QQQ. They were building a lower-cost version of the same exposure, designed specifically for a different type of investor, not the active trader, not the institutional desk, the long-term buy-and-hold investor. Understanding that distinction is what resolves the question. Both QQQ and QQQM are issued by Invesco. Both track the Nasdaq 100 index. Both hold the same companies, the 100 largest non-financial companies, listed on the Nasdaq exchange. The same technology companies, the same consumer names, the same communication services companies. The holdings are identical. The index methodology is identical. The one number that actually separates them is the expense ratio. QQQ charges 0.20% per year. QQQM charges 0.15% per year. That is a 5 basis point difference. When investors see numbers that small, the instinct is usually to dismiss them. 5 basis points. It barely registers. But this instinct is one of the most expensive assumptions a long-term investor can make. Here is a way to actually picture what that difference means. Say you invest $50,000 into a Nasdaq 100 ETF today. You hold it for 25 years. Every year, QQQ quietly removes 0.20% of your asset value as a management fee. QQQM removes 0.15%. That is a difference of 0.05% per year. Over 25 years, with consistent compounding, the cumulative effect of that fee gap is not symbolic. It is real. It is measurable. And it is a cost you paid for something you may never have used. This is exactly the kind of quiet inefficiency that long-term investors need to pay attention to, not because it destroys a portfolio, but because it is an ongoing, unnecessary cost, with no performance benefit attached. So why does QQQ carry the higher fee? The answer is liquidity. QQQ is one of the most liquid ETFs ever created. It routinely trades billions of dollars of daily volume. Large asset managers, hedge funds, trading desks, they use QQQ as a tool. They need to move into and out of Nasdaq 100 exposure quickly. They need tight bid-ask spreads. They need market depth. QQQ provides all of that, and the infrastructure that enables that level of institutional liquidity carries a cost. That cost is partially reflected in the higher expense ratio. QQQM was built for a different use case. Lower daily volume, smaller spread requirements, no need for institutional-grade liquidity infrastructure. And because of that, a lower ongoing cost passed directly to the investor. This brings us back to the question that opened this video. QQQ or QQQM, which one is right for you? If you are a long-term buy and hold investor, the answer is almost always QQQM, not because it outperforms. It does not. But because you are paying for a liquidity infrastructure you will never use. You are not trading in and out. You are not using this as a hedging vehicle. You are not moving large institutional volumes. You are buying a position, holding it, and letting time do the work. In that context, paying an extra 5 basis points per year is not a neutral choice. It is a small, recurring, unnecessary expense. And small, recurring, unnecessary expenses, held for decades, are where the quiet drag on a long-term portfolio lives. There is one meaningful exception worth naming. QQQ has a large and liquid options market built around it. If your strategy includes covered calls, protective puts, or other options approaches, QQQ may be the better vehicle. Even for a long-term holder, the options depth simply does not exist to the same degree with QQQM. That is a real structural distinction. If options are part of your investment approach, the calculus changes. But for the straightforward buy and hold investor, building Nasdaq 100 exposure for the long run, the equation is simple. Lower cost, same exposure, same index, better long-term outcome. The structure question resolves cleanly. There is a pattern that shows up in almost every investment comparison like this. The complexity is rarely in the product itself. It is in the criteria. When you do not have clear criteria for what you are trying to optimize, the choice looks complicated. When your criteria are clear, the choice becomes obvious. QQQ and QQQM appear to be two different options, but they are really one index with two different structural designs. And the design you choose should reflect the investor you actually are, not the investor you imagine in some ideal scenario. Most retail investors holding Nasdaq 100 ETFs are not actively trading them. They are not running sophisticated derivative strategies. They are building a position gradually. They are adding when they can. They are holding when the market gets uncomfortable. And they are waiting for the long-term compounding effect to become visible. The comparison between QQQ and QQQM will not show up on a chart in any dramatic way. It will not feel meaningful in the first year, or even the third. But across a decade, and then 2 decades, the structural efficiency of the lower-cost version quietly compounds into real money. Not because one ETF outperformed the other, but because one investor paid an unnecessary fee every single year, and the other did not. For the buy and hold investor, the lower-cost version of the same exposure is simply the right tool. Not dramatically, not heroically, quietly. Good investment decisions rarely announce themselves. They do not feel like breakthroughs in the moment. They feel like small structural choices made with clear criteria, the kind of choices that are easy to overlook because they are boring. But boring and efficient, held for a long time, is exactly what compounding is built on. Compounding quietly investing that gives you peace of mind. If this video helped, subscribe and leave a like. I hope this becomes a small source of strength in your investment journey. The content in this video is for general informational purposes only. All final decisions and responsibilities remain with the investor. Thank you for spending time with Compounding Quietly today.